You know, we hear a lot about revenue, right? Big profit numbers in the headlines. But forget all that for a second. There's one number that really tells you if a company is actually doing its job for the people who own it. Today, we are decoding that number, return on equity.
So let me ask you this. How do you actually know if a business is creating real value for its shareholders? It's a simple question, right? But the answer? Well, it's what separates the smart investors from the rest of the pack. The secret isn't in those flashy headlines. It's hiding in a single ratio that just cuts through all the noise. And today, we're going to master it. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to cover the basics of what ROE is, the shareholders report card. Then, we'll get into the fun stuff, a brilliant framework called the DuPont analysis that lets us see how it all works. We'll look at the 3 levers companies pull, learn how to spot the real signals from the fakes, and by the end of this, you'll be able to see the full picture that honestly most people just completely miss.
Okay, let's dive right into Section 1. We're starting with the basics, but with a twist. This report card, what is it really grading? At its heart, ROE is just beautifully simple. I want you to think of it this way. For every single dollar an owner has put into the business, how many cents of pure hard profit does that $1 generate in a year? That's it. It's the ultimate measure of how well management is using the owner's cash to make more cash.
Now, here's where we separate the amateurs from the pros. A quick and dirty calculation can be really misleading. Why? Well, think about it. A company's equity can change all the time during the year because of things like issuing new stock or buying some back. So by using the average equity over the year, we get a much truer picture of the capital that was actually at work generating that year's profit. It's a tiny little tweak that makes a world of difference for accuracy.
Okay, so we've got our number, but a single number, all by itself, it's kind of useless, maybe even a little dangerous. We need to look under the hood. And for that, we've got one of the most elegant tools in all of finance.
The DuPont analysis. Think of it like a mechanic's diagnostic computer for a car, or maybe a doctor's MRI. It takes that single ROE number and just blows it apart, showing us exactly which parts of the company's engine are firing perfectly and which ones might be about to break down. It tells us the story behind the number.
And here it is. This is the big reveal. ROI isn't just one thing. It's actually 3 different things all multiplied together. You've got profitability, that's how much you make on each sale. You've got efficiency, that's how many sales you can squeeze out of your assets. And then you have leverage, which is really how much debt you're using to juice the system. A change in any one of these changes the whole equation.
So let's go ahead and pull on each of those 3 levers: profitability, efficiency, and the riskiest one of them all, leverage. And let's see exactly how they work.
This chart breaks it down perfectly. Your profit margin is all about strategy and discipline, keeping your costs under control. Asset turnover is all about operational speed, how hard you can make your assets work to generate revenue. And financial leverage, well, that's the double-edged sword, isn't it? It is a pure measure of how much risk the company is taking on. So how does this actually play out in the real world? Well, think about a luxury brand. They get a high ROE by making massive profit margins on just a few items. A discount retailer, on the other hand, does the complete opposite. It makes almost nothing on each item, but it sells a ton of them, driving its ROE through insane efficiency and asset turnover. 2 completely different strategies, both aiming for that same great result. Okay, so we get the mechanics. But what's a good number? I mean, what's the benchmark? What separates a good ROE from a mediocre one?
Generally speaking, investors often look for a consistent ROE somewhere in that 15 to 20% range. That's usually a sign of a really solid business. If you can get north of 20%, you're often looking at a company with a serious competitive advantage, what Warren Buffett famously calls a moat. But, and this is probably the most important part, that number means absolutely nothing without context.
A good number is totally relative. I mean, look at this. A tech company with no factories can hit 25% ROE pretty easily. But a big utility company that has billions tied up in power plants, it might be world-class at 10%. The key takeaway here is this: never ever analyze ROE in a vacuum. It's always about comparing it to its direct competition.
So, this brings us to a really crucial part of our analysis. The numbers, well, they can lie. Or at the very least, they can be cleverly disguised. We have to be aware of the common traps that can make this powerful metric pretty misleading.
So let me just ask you flat out, is a high ROE always a good thing? The surprising answer is a hard no. In fact, sometimes a super high ROE is a blaring siren warning you to run the other way.
And this right here is the #1 trap. A company can pump up its ROE by just piling on a mountain of debt. It's like financial steroids. Sure, it makes the numbers look fantastic in the short term, but it makes the whole company incredibly fragile. A high ROE built on debt isn't a sign of strength, it's a huge sign of risk.
Now, looking at this slide, you can really see the traps laid out. High leverage, that's the most common one we just talked about, but share buybacks can also make a company that's not even growing look like it's improving just by shrinking the denominator. And then there's this weird math quirk where a failing, insolvent company can actually post a positive ROE. These are the kinds of things that catch inexperienced investors every single time.
So how do we avoid these traps? Well, we can't just look at ROE all by itself. A professional analyst is always going to build a much more complete picture.
This right here, this is the lie detector test for ROE. We bring in another metric, return on assets, or ROA. Now, ROA doesn't care how a company is financed. It just asks a simple question. How good is this business at making money from its stuff? You know, its factories, its inventory, its cash. And here is the crucial insight. If the ROE is high, but the ROA is low, you have found the red flag. That is definitive proof that the company's great returns are coming from risky financial engineering, not from a great underlying business.
And if you want the purest possible view of a company's performance, analysts often turn to something called ROIC, Return on Invested Capital. You can think of it as an even better, more robust version of ROA. It just strips out all the financial gamesmanship and tells you one thing: how good is management at allocating capital to generate profits? For a lot of people, it's the truest measure of business quality there is.
So there you have it. We've gone from a simple number to a full-blown diagnostic toolkit. You can now look under the hood of pretty much any company and see what's really going on. The question isn't just what's the ROE anymore. The real question is this company's success built on a solid foundation of operational excellence, or is it a house of cards made of debt? Thanks for joining this explainer.